The lamp flickered again, casting shadows across the receipts scattered on my kitchen table. 3 a.m., and here I was, Soren Valden, 49 years old, trying to fix something that probably wasn't worth fixing. Story of my life, really. I took another sip of the cheap whiskey and squinted at the loose wire. 25 years of marriage, and I'd become an expert at patching things that should have been replaced long ago. The house, the furniture, the relationship, all held together with duct tape and stubborn determination. Jessa's keys jingled in the front door, late again. Third time this week, and it was only Wednesday. "Don't wait up," she called, her voice echoing through the hallway, like I had a choice. Sleep had become elusive lately, especially since the layoffs at Morrison Financial. Being a finance director meant nothing when the company decided to restructure. 23 years of service, and they gave me a handshake and a severance package that wouldn't last 6 months. I heard her heels clicking on the hardwood, then the soft thud of her gym bag hitting the floor. The scent that followed made me pause. Expensive cologne, definitely not the drugstore stuff I wore. Something woody and sophisticated, the kind that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "Working late again?" I called out, not looking up from the lamp. "Client dinner," she replied, already heading upstairs. "You know how it is." I did know how it was. Jessa worked as a senior paralegal at Hartwell & Associates, one of those white shoe law firms downtown where everyone wore suits that cost more than my car payment. She'd been angling for a promotion to office manager for months, putting in extra hours, networking events, the whole corporate climb. But client dinners didn't usually involve gym bags. The water ran upstairs. Shower time. I set down the lamp and wandered over to where she'd dropped her things. The bag was partially unzipped, and something white caught my eye. A receipt, folded and tucked into the side pocket. I shouldn't have looked. 25 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage. You build trust, or you don't survive. But something about the way she'd avoided eye contact, the lingering cologne, the defensive tone in her voice made my fingers move before my conscience could stop them. Chez Laurent. Dinner for 2, wine, dessert, $237, yesterday's date. My stomach dropped. I'd been home yesterday watching Netflix and eating leftover pizza while Jessa worked late, or so I thought. The shower was still running. I dug deeper into the bag, past the workout clothes and protein bars. Another receipt, Hampton Inn, 1 night, king bed. Same date. My hands started shaking, not from anger, not yet, from the terrible clarity that comes when the pieces finally click into place. The late nights, the new clothes, the sudden interest in fitness and wellness seminars, the way she'd been looking at me lately, like I was furniture she was planning to replace. I pulled out her old iPad, the one she used for work emails, and powered it up. She'd never changed the password. Our anniversary date, 0615. How's that for irony? The messages loaded, and my world tilted sideways. Group chat. Girls' night out. Jessa. He's amazing. 3 hours at the hotel and I can barely walk straight. Rena, her best friend. Girl, you're glowing. When are you going to dump the unnecessary burden? Jessa. Soon. Just need to get my finances sorted first. Soren's so clueless he has no idea what's coming. Rena. What about the kids? Jessa. Ross is in college, Amelia's graduating soon. They'll understand. I can't waste my life taking care of a man who can't even keep a job. I scrolled up, my chest tightening with each message. Months of this. Months of planning, scheming, laughing at my expense. Photos of expensive dinners, screenshots of apartment listings, discussions about lawyers and asset division. And then I found the photos. Not explicit, thankfully. I didn't think I could handle that, but intimate enough. Jessa and a man I didn't recognize, clearly comfortable with each other. He was younger, probably late 30s, with the kind of sculpted physique that screamed personal trainer or fitness influencer. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect everything. The shower turned off upstairs. I quickly screenshotted the most damning messages and emailed them to myself, then closed the iPad and shoved it back in the bag. My hands were steady now, my mind crystal clear. 23 years in finance had taught me to think analytically, even in crisis, especially in crisis. Jessa appeared at the top of the stairs in her robe, hair wrapped in a towel. "Still up?" she asked, descending slowly. "You should get some sleep. You have that interview tomorrow, right?" The interview. For a part-time bookkeeping position that paid half what I used to make. She knew exactly how to twist the knife. "Yeah," I managed. "Just fixing this lamp." She glanced at the table, at the scattered tools and the receipts I'd hastily shoved aside. For a moment, I thought she might notice something was wrong, but she just shrugged and headed for the kitchen. "Don't stay up too late," she said, opening the refrigerator. "And clean up that mess when you're done." I watched her pour a glass of wine, the good stuff, not the cheap bottle we usually shared, and settle onto the couch with her phone. Probably texting him, probably planning their next rendezvous while I sat 3 feet away, invisible. "Jessa," I said quietly. "Hmm?" She didn't look up. "How was dinner tonight?" "Fine, boring client stuff. You wouldn't be interested." The lie came so easily, so naturally, like she'd been practicing. I picked up the lamp and twisted the wire back into place. The light flickered once, then held steady. Sometimes fixing things was just a matter of knowing where to apply pressure. "Good night," I said, gathering my tools. "Night." I climbed the stairs slowly, my mind already working through possibilities. In finance, you learn that every problem has a solution. You just need to find the right angle, the right leverage point. People think accountants are boring, predictable. They don't realize we see everything, every transaction, every hidden asset, every lie buried in the numbers. Jessa had made one crucial mistake. She thought I was weak, defeated, a man with nothing left to lose. She was half right. I was a man with nothing left to lose. But weak? That remained to be seen. I lay in bed, listening to her move around downstairs, probably deleting messages and covering her tracks. Too little, too late. I'd already seen enough. 25 years of marriage, and she thought she could discard me like a broken appliance. Write me off as a failure, a burden, an unnecessary burden to be removed from her perfect new life. She had no idea what she'd just unleashed. The next morning, Jessa left early for work, kissing my cheek with the same mechanical affection she'd show a houseplant. I waited until her car disappeared down the street, then opened my laptop and got to work. 23 years in finance had taught me that information was power, and power was leverage. If Jessa wanted to play games, I'd show her what a professional looked like. First step, identify the enemy. The photos from her iPad weren't clear enough to make a positive identification, but I had other resources. I logged into our joint credit card account. She hadn't thought to remove my access yet, and started tracking her spending patterns. The gym membership was new, purchased 3 months ago. Elite Fitness on Maple Street. Their website featured staff photos, and there he was, Trevor Mitchell, personal wellness coach and lifestyle consultant. 36 years old, certified in about a dozen different fitness programs, and judging by his Instagram feed, completely obsessed with himself. I scrolled through his posts, shirtless gym selfies, motivational quotes about living your best life, and photos of expensive meals at restaurants I couldn't afford. The kind of man who used entrepreneur to describe unemployment and wellness coach to justify charging desperate housewives for attention. But what caught my eye was the disconnect between his lifestyle and his apparent income. The clothes, the restaurants, the luxury car in his posts, none of it added up for a gym trainer's salary. Either he had family money, or he was living beyond his means. I pulled up the business registration database. Trevor's company, Elite Lifestyle Solutions, had been incorporated 18 months ago. The financial filings were public record, and they painted an interesting picture. Minimal revenue, maxed out business credit lines, and a registered address that turned out to be a UPS store mailbox. Trevor Mitchell was broke. Worse than broke, he was leveraged to his eyeballs, living on credit and charm. No wonder he was targeting married women with stable incomes. Jessa wasn't his girlfriend. She was his business plan. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the first spark of genuine amusement I'd had in months. Jessa thought she was trading up, leaving her financially struggling husband for a successful entrepreneur. In reality, she was jumping from one sinking ship to another, except this one had better abs and a more convincing sales pitch. My phone buzzed. Text from Amelia, my 20-year-old daughter. "Dad, are you and Mom okay? She seemed weird at dinner Sunday." Smart kid. Amelia had always been perceptive, probably picked up on the tension before I did. I typed back quickly. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just work stress. How are classes?" "Okay, I guess. Ross says you got laid off? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because your mother made it clear that my unemployment was a source of shame, not something to burden the kids with. But I couldn't say that. Just a temporary setback. I'll figure something out." "You always do. Love you, Dad." "Love you too." I set the phone aside and returned to my research. Ross, my 22-year-old son, was finishing his senior year at State. Both kids would be independent soon, which simplified things considerably. Whatever happened between Jessa and me wouldn't disrupt their lives too much. The doorbell rang. I closed the laptop and answered it, finding Mrs. Carraway from next door holding a casserole dish. "Morning, Soren. Thought you might like some leftovers." Harold made his famous tuna noodle again. Mrs. Carraway was 73 and had lived next door for 30 years. She'd watched our kids grow up, attended their birthday parties, and had an uncanny ability to sense neighborhood drama before it exploded into the open. "That's very kind of you," I said, accepting the dish. "Would you like some coffee?" "Don't mind if I do." She settled at the kitchen table while I poured 2 cups, her sharp eyes taking in everything: the scattered papers, the laptop, the general air of a man with too much time on his hands. "Jessa left early today," she observed. "Work. You know how it is." She sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "Saw her coming home late again last night, 3rd time this week." I kept my expression neutral. "Client dinners. The legal business is demanding." "I'm sure it is." Another pause. "That's a lovely car her friend drives. The young man who picked her up Tuesday evening. Very expensive looking." My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. "Young man?" "Oh yes. Quite handsome. Athletic type. They seemed very friendly." So Trevor had been here, at my house, picking up my wife for their little rendezvous. The sheer audacity of it was almost impressive. "Probably just a colleague," I managed. Mrs. Carraway's expression suggested she wasn't buying it, but she was too polite to push further. We chatted about the weather and the neighborhood watch meeting for a few more minutes before she excused herself. I stood at the window and watched her walk back to her house, my mind racing. If Mrs. Carraway had seen them together, other neighbors probably had too. Jessa was getting sloppy, confident that her clueless husband wouldn't notice or wouldn't care. Time to disabuse her of that notion. I spent the rest of the morning researching Trevor's background more thoroughly. Social media was a goldmine. The man documented every moment of his life with the dedication of a court stenographer. I learned his workout schedule, his favorite restaurants, his weekend hangouts, even his coffee order. More importantly, I learned about his debts. A little creative searching through public records revealed a pattern of financial irresponsibility stretching back years. Unpaid credit cards, a defaulted car loan, even a small claims judgment from a former landlord. Trevor Mitchell was a walking financial disaster, held together by charm and the willingness to let other people pay his bills. Around noon, my phone rang. Jessa. "Hi, honey," she said, her voice artificially bright. "How did the interview go?" "Haven't left yet. It's at 2. "Oh, right. Well, good luck. I might be late tonight. Another client dinner. Of course. Anyone I know? Just some boring corporate types. You'd hate it. Another lie, delivered with practiced ease. I wondered how long she'd been doing this, not just the affair, but the casual deception that came with it. Had she always been this good at lying, or was it a skill she'd developed recently? "I'll save you some dinner," I said. "Don't wait up. These things can run late." The line went quiet. In the old days, she would have said she loved me before hanging up. Now she just ended the call, like I was a business contact or a telemarketer. I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror as I got ready for the interview. 49 years old, graying at the temples, carrying an extra 15 pounds around the middle. Not exactly a prize catch by conventional standards, but I'd been faithful, supportive, present for every school play and soccer game and family crisis. I'd worked 60-hour weeks to pay for the house, the cars, the kids' educations. And this was my reward. The interview went better than expected. The company was small, family-owned, and they appreciated my experience even if they couldn't match my previous salary. I'd have an answer by Friday. On the drive home, I made a detour past Elite Fitness. Trevor's car was in the parking lot, a leased BMW that probably cost more per month than my mortgage payment. I sat across the street for 20 minutes, watching the entrance, until he emerged with a middle-aged woman who clearly wasn't there for her health. She handed him an envelope before getting into her Mercedes and driving away. Interesting. Very interesting. I followed Trevor to his next stop, a coffee shop downtown where he met with two more women, both well-dressed, both old enough to be his mother. Each meeting lasted about 30 minutes, and each ended with another envelope changing hands. Trevor Mitchell wasn't just a personal trainer having an affair with my wife. He was running some kind of operation, targeting lonely women with disposable income. Jessa wasn't special, she was just another mark. That should have made me feel better. Instead, it made me angrier. Bad enough that she was cheating, worse that she was being played by a professional con artist who saw her as nothing more than a paycheck. I drove home and called my old boxing coach. "Mick's gym," the gravelly voice answered. "Mick, it's Soren Valden. Remember me?" "Soren, how the hell are you? Haven't seen you in years." "I'm okay. Listen, I was thinking about getting back into training. You still open evenings?" "Every night till 10. What's the occasion?" I stared out the window at the house where I'd raised my children and built what I thought was a solid marriage. Let's just say I need to get back in shape for what's coming next. I started going to Mick's gym every evening after Jessa left for her client dinners. The old man was 65 now, grayer and more weathered, but he still moved like a fighter. He'd trained me in my 20s, back when I thought I might make something of myself in the ring before reality and responsibility intervened. "You're holding back," he said after my third session, watching me work the heavy bag. "Something's eating at you, but you're not letting it out." I paused, wiping sweat from my forehead. "Just getting back into it." "Bullshit. I've been training fighters for 40 years. You're angry about something, but you're keeping it locked up tight. That's not how this works." He was right. I was angry, furious actually, but I was channeling it into research and planning instead of raw emotion. Maybe that was a mistake. "My wife is cheating on me," I said quietly. Mick nodded like I'd just told him the weather forecast. "How long?" "Months, probably. I just found out last week." "You confront her yet?" "No, I'm gathering information first." "Smart man. Most guys go in swinging without knowing what they're up against." He adjusted my stance, positioning my feet wider. "But eventually, you're going to have to face it head on. When that time comes, you better be ready." I threw another combination, harder this time, feeling some of the rage finally break through the analytical shell I'd built around it. "There we go," Mick said approvingly. "Now you're fighting." On Friday, I got the call about the bookkeeping job. They wanted me to start Monday. The pay was terrible, but it was something. I decided to celebrate with a drink at Murphy's, the neighborhood bar where I used to meet colleagues after work. The place was mostly empty at 6 p.m., just a few regulars and a bartender who remembered my usual order. I was halfway through my second beer when Trevor Mitchell walked in. He didn't notice me at first, too busy scanning the room like he was looking for someone. When his eyes finally landed on me, I saw a flicker of recognition followed by confusion. He knew who I was. Jessa had probably shown him photos, but he couldn't figure out why I was here. I raised my beer in a mock toast. "Trevor, right? I've heard so much about you." He froze, clearly debating whether to run or play dumb. To his credit, he chose option 3, brazen it out. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" He approached the bar, signaling for a drink. "Soren Valden, Jessa's husband." The bartender, sensing tension, moved to the far end of the bar. Trevor's drink arrived, something expensive and complicated, and he took a long sip before responding. "Oh, right. Jessa's mentioned you. Sorry about the job situation, man. That's rough." The casual dismissal, the fake sympathy, the way he said my wife's name like they were old friends, it all hit me at once. 3 weeks of careful planning and controlled anger evaporated in an instant. "Yeah, it's been tough," I said, standing up. "But you know what they say about adversity. It reveals character." Trevor's eyes narrowed slightly. He was bigger than me, probably stronger, but I could see uncertainty creeping into his expression. Whatever Jessa had told him about her pathetic husband, it hadn't prepared him for this conversation. "Look, I don't know what you think you know." "I know you're broke," I interrupted. "Leveraged to your eyeballs, living on credit and other people's money. I know about the business that exists only on paper and the debts you can't pay. I know you target vulnerable women and sell them fantasies they can't afford." His face went pale. "You don't know anything." "I know Jessa isn't your only client. I saw you at the coffee shop yesterday, collecting your fees. Very professional operation you've got running." Trevor set his drink down hard, liquid sloshing over the rim. "Whatever you think you saw, I think I saw a con artist who picked the wrong mark." I stepped closer, close enough to smell his expensive cologne, the same scent I'd noticed on Jessa. "See, you assumed I was just another clueless husband who'd roll over and take it. But I'm not. I'm a finance director with 23 years of experience tracking money and finding discrepancies, and right now, you're the biggest discrepancy in my life." The bar had gone completely quiet. Even the regulars were watching now, sensing that something significant was about to happen. "You need to back off," Trevor said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Or what? You'll tell Jessa?" "Go ahead. Tell her everything. Tell her about your other clients, your debts, your fake business. Tell her she's trading a husband with temporary money problems for a boyfriend with permanent character problems." I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the screenshots from Jessa's messages, the one where she called me an unnecessary burden that she couldn't wait to dump. She really said that, didn't she? An unnecessary burden, 25 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage we built together, and that's how she sees me. Trevor glanced at the phone, then back at my face. Whatever he saw there made him take a step backward. "Look, man, I never meant for—" "Yes, you did. You meant for exactly this. You found a married woman with money troubles and a stable income, and you sold her a fantasy. The problem is, fantasies don't pay real bills. And when this falls apart, and it will fall apart, she's going to be left with nothing. No husband, no savings, and a boyfriend who can't even afford his own car payment." I finished my beer and set the glass down gently. "Enjoy your evening, Trevor, and give Jessa my regards." I walked out of the bar feeling lighter than I had in weeks, not because I'd confronted him. That was just the opening move, but because I'd finally let some of the anger out, and it felt good, clean, necessary. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Text from an unknown number. "Stay away from me and Jessa or you'll regret it." I laughed out loud. Trevor Mitchell, the great manipulator, reduced to texting threats like a teenager. I screenshotted the message and added it to my growing file of evidence. Then I drove to the office supply store and bought a shredder, a scanner, and a locking file cabinet. If Jessa wanted to play hardball, I'd show her what professional preparation looked like. The game was just beginning. Jessa came home that night in a mood I'd never seen before, not angry exactly, but agitated, like she couldn't sit still. She paced around the kitchen, opening cabinets and closing them without taking anything out. "Everything okay?" I asked, not looking up from the financial documents I was organizing. "Fine, just tired." But she wasn't acting tired. She was acting like someone who'd received disturbing news and didn't know how to process it. "How was your client dinner?" "Canceled. Last minute." I nodded sympathetically. "That's frustrating. All that preparation for nothing." She shot me a sharp look, like she was trying to determine if I knew something. I kept my expression neutral, focused on the papers in front of me. "What are you working on?" she asked. "Just organizing our finances, trying to figure out where we stand before I start the new job." "New job?" "The bookkeeping position. I start Monday." "Oh, right." She seemed distracted, distant. "That's good." She disappeared upstairs, and I heard her on the phone, voice low and urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. She was upset about something. 20 minutes later, she came back down dressed for the gym. "Going for a workout," she announced. "Need to clear my head." "At 9 p.m.? They're open late." She grabbed her keys and left without another word. I waited 5 minutes, then got in my car and followed her. She didn't go to the gym. Instead, she drove to a motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. Trevor's BMW was already in the parking lot. I parked across the street and waited. They emerged 45 minutes later, both looking tense. They stood by their cars talking, arguing actually, based on their body language. Jessa kept gesturing angrily while Trevor tried to calm her down. Finally, she got in her car and drove away. Trevor sat in his BMW for another 10 minutes, talking on his phone, before leaving in the opposite direction. I followed him. He drove to an apartment complex downtown, one of those converted warehouse buildings that marketed itself as luxury living, but was really just overpriced studios with exposed brick. I watched him park and head inside, noting the apartment number when a light came on in a third-floor window. The next morning, I did some more research. Trevor's apartment was a one-bedroom rental, $1,500 a month. His lease application was public record, and it painted a fascinating picture. He'd lied about his income, inflated his business revenue, and provided fake references. The man was a professional fabricator. But what really caught my attention was his emergency contact, Rebecca Mitchell, listed as his sister, with an address in Florida. A quick internet search revealed that Rebecca was actually his ex-wife, and she'd filed a restraining order against him 2 years ago for harassment and financial fraud. Trevor Mitchell wasn't just broke. He was a predator with a documented history of targeting women for financial gain. I printed everything and added it to my file. Then I called Mick. "I need a favor," I said when he answered. "What kind of favor?" "The kind that requires discretion and maybe some of your old contacts." Mick had been around the fight game for decades. He knew people, not all of them entirely legal, but all of them loyal to him. "What do you need?" "Information. Background checks. The kind of stuff that doesn't show up in public records." "This about your wife?" "Her boyfriend. I want to know everything. Where he came from, who he owes money to, what kind of trouble he's running from. Give me 48 hours. That evening, I was at the gym when Jessa called. "Where are you?" she demanded. "Working out." "Why?" "Someone was asking questions about me at work today, about my personal life." I paused my workout, genuinely surprised. "What kind of questions?" "I don't know. Rena said some guy came by claiming to be from an insurance company, wanting to verify information for a policy application. But we don't have any pending applications." "Interesting. Either someone else was investigating Jessa, or Trevor was being less careful than I'd given him credit for. "That's weird," I said. "Did you call the insurance company?" "Of course I called them. They said they didn't send anyone." "Maybe it was identity theft. You should probably check your credit report." "I already did. Everything looks normal." We talked for a few more minutes, but she was clearly distracted. After hanging up, I finished my workout and drove home, my mind racing through possibilities. The house was dark when I arrived. Jessa's car was gone. Another client dinner, no doubt. I poured a glass of wine and settled in the living room to think. My phone rang around 10 p.m. "Mick, you sitting down?" he asked. "Yeah, what did you find?" "Your boy Trevor's got more problems than a math textbook. Real name's Trevor Kowalski. He changed it legally 3 years ago. He's got warrants in 2 states, owes money to some very unforgiving people, and he's been running this same con for years." "What kind of con?" "Targets middle-aged women going through divorces or marital problems, poses as a life coach or trainer, sells them on the idea that he can help them transform their lives. Takes their money, sleeps with them for a few months, then disappears when the heat gets too intense." "How many women?" "At least a dozen that we could verify. Probably more. He's gotten good at it, knows exactly what to say, how to make them feel special and understood. The perfect predator for women who feel invisible in their own marriages." I felt my chest tighten. Jessa wasn't special to Trevor. She was just another mark in a long line of victims. "There's more," Mick continued. "He owes serious money to some loan sharks in Boston. The kind of people who don't accept payment plans. Word is he's got maybe 6 weeks to come up with 50 grand, or he's going to have bigger problems than bad credit." $50,000? Gambling debts mostly, plus interest and penalties. He's been staying one step ahead of them by moving around and finding new sources of income, but they're getting impatient. I thanked Mick and hung up, staring at the wall as the pieces fell into place. Trevor wasn't just conning Jessa for pocket money. He was using her to stay alive. And if he was desperate enough, there was no telling how far he'd go to get what he needed. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My phone buzzed. Text from Jessa. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." I looked at the clock. 10:30 p.m. What law firm worked past 10 on a Friday night? I grabbed my keys and drove to her office building. The parking lot was empty except for a security guard's car. No sign of Jessa's Honda anywhere. Another lie, another betrayal, another night spent in some cheap motel with a man who saw her as nothing more than a walking ATM. I drove home and poured another glass of wine, then opened my laptop and started typing. If Jessa wanted to play games, I'd give her a game she'd never forget. But first, I needed to level the playing field. Time to show Trevor Mitchell what happened when you picked the wrong family to destroy. The document arrived Monday morning, delivered by certified mail while Jessa was at work, and I was getting ready for my first day at the new job. The return address was from a law firm in Boston I'd never heard of. Inside was a single sheet of legal letterhead with a brief message. "Mr. Valden, we represent certain parties who have a financial interest in Mr. Trevor Kowalski. We believe you may have information relevant to our client's case. Please contact us at your earliest convenience." I stared at the letter for a long moment. Either this was an incredible coincidence, or word was getting around that I was asking questions about Trevor. Given my recent conversation with Mick, I suspected the latter. I called the number on the letterhead. "Brennan and Associates," a professional voice answered. "This is Soren Valden. I received a letter regarding Trevor Kowalski. Please hold." A moment later, a different voice came on the line, older, gravelly, with a slight Boston accent. "Mr. Valden, this is Frank Brennan. Thank you for calling. I represent some businessmen who have a financial relationship with Mr. Kowalski. We understand you've been conducting your own investigation into his activities." "I might be. What kind of financial relationship? The kind that involves significant outstanding debts and a rapidly approaching deadline. My clients are reasonable people, but their patience has limits. I leaned back in my chair, processing the implications. What do you want from me? Information. Mr. Kowalski has been very difficult to locate recently. We believe he may be using a romantic relationship to hide assets or secure funding for his obligations. And you think I know about this relationship? We think your wife might be financing his lifestyle while he avoids his responsibilities. The blunt statement hit me like a physical blow, not because it was unexpected, but because hearing it from a stranger made it real in a way that all my research and surveillance hadn't. What happens if he doesn't pay? I asked. That would be unfortunate for everyone involved. My clients prefer to resolve these matters professionally, but Mr. Kowalski's continued evasion is becoming problematic. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Trevor wasn't just a con artist, he was a man running from serious people who didn't accept excuses. I'll think about it, I said. Don't think too long, Mr. Valden. Time is a luxury none of us can afford right now. I hung up and sat in my kitchen, staring at the letter. Jessa had no idea what she'd gotten herself into. She thought she was having an affair with a successful entrepreneur. In reality, she was bankrolling a fugitive who owed money to loan sharks. My first day at the new job was a welcome distraction. The company was small, family-owned, and refreshingly straightforward after years of corporate politics. I spent the morning learning their systems and the afternoon reviewing their books. Simple, honest work, with people who appreciated competence over charisma. During my lunch break, I called Amelia. Dad, how's the new job? Good so far. How are you doing? Okay, I guess. Mom's been acting weird lately, really distracted and snappy. Is everything all right at home? I chose my words carefully. Your mother's under a lot of stress at work. Sometimes that affects people's moods. Yeah, maybe. She just seems different, like she's angry all the time but trying to hide it. I'm sure it's temporary. How's school? We talked for a few more minutes about her classes and her plans for summer. She was thinking about staying on campus for a summer internship instead of coming home. Part of me was relieved. Whatever was about to happen between Jessa and me, the kids didn't need to witness it. That evening, I was reading in the living room when Jessa came home. She looked exhausted, stressed in a way that went beyond normal work fatigue. Rough day? I asked. You could say that. She poured herself a large glass of wine and slumped onto the couch. Someone's been asking questions about me. About us. What kind of questions? Financial stuff. About our assets, our debts, whether we're planning any major purchases or investments. I set down my book. Who was asking? I don't know. A private investigator, maybe? Or someone from an insurance company. The stories keep changing. Did you talk to them? Of course not. But it's unsettling. Why would someone be investigating us? I could think of several reasons, but I kept them to myself. Maybe it's related to my layoff. Sometimes companies do background checks on former employees, especially in finance. Maybe. She didn't sound convinced. Have you noticed anyone following you? Strange phone calls? Anything unusual? No, nothing like that. Are you worried about something specific? She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her wine glass. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller, more vulnerable than I'd heard it in months. I think I might have made some mistakes recently. Financial mistakes. I'm not sure how to fix them. This was it. The opening I'd been waiting for. The chance to have an honest conversation about what was really happening. I could confront her about Trevor, offer to help her untangle whatever mess she'd gotten into, maybe even save our marriage. Instead, I said, "What kind of mistakes?" I can't really talk about it right now. Client confidentiality issues. But if someone comes asking questions about money, about investments or loans or anything like that, You don't know anything, okay? Okay. She finished her wine and headed upstairs. I'm going to bed early. This headache is terrible. I listened to her moving around upstairs, shower, hair dryer, the soft sounds of getting ready for bed. 30 minutes later, the house was quiet. I waited another hour, then quietly made my way to her purse. Her phone was inside, and for once, she'd forgotten to lock it. The messages told the story I'd been dreading. Trevor was pressuring her for money. A lot of money. He'd convinced her it was for a business investment, a chance to get in on the ground floor of his expanding wellness empire. All she needed to do was liquidate some assets, maybe take out a small loan against the house. The amounts they were discussing made my stomach turn. 20,000, 30,000, enough to wipe out our savings and put us in serious debt. But the most damning message was the most recent one, sent just 2 hours ago. Trevor, they found me at the gym today, asked about you specifically. We need to move faster. Jessa, I'm scared. What if Soren finds out? Trevor, he won't. He's too wrapped up in his own problems to notice. Besides, once we get the money, we can disappear. Start fresh somewhere new. Jessa, what about the kids? Trevor, they're adults. They'll understand eventually. I screenshotted everything and forwarded it to my secure email account, then carefully placed the phone back in her purse. Jessa wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to run away with Trevor, taking our life savings to pay his debts to dangerous people. And she was willing to abandon our children to do it. I poured myself a drink and sat in the dark kitchen, processing the magnitude of her betrayal. 25 years of marriage, and she was ready to throw it all away for a con artist who saw her as nothing more than a solution to his problems. But she'd made one crucial error in judgment. She assumed I was too weak, too defeated, too focused on my own problems to fight back. She was about to learn how wrong she was. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to Frank Brennan. If Trevor wanted to play dangerous games with dangerous people, I'd make sure he got exactly what he deserved. The gloves were coming off. I met Frank Brennan at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where we could talk without drawing attention. He was exactly what I'd expected. Mid-60s, expensive suit. The kind of man who'd spent his career solving problems that couldn't be handled through normal channels. Mr. Valden, he said, settling into the booth across from me. Thank you for reaching out. I want to be clear about something, I said. I don't want my wife hurt. Whatever happens to Trevor is between you and him, but she's not part of this. Understood. My clients have no interest in collateral damage. They simply want what they're owed. I slid a folder across the table. Everything I know about Trevor's current situation, where he's staying, his schedule, his sources of income, and evidence that he's planning to leave town soon with money that doesn't belong to him. Brennan flipped through the documents, his expression never changing. This is very thorough, professional quality work. I used to be good at my job. Used to be? I still am. I just needed the right motivation to remember it. He closed the folder and leaned back. What do you want in return? Time. I need Trevor out of the picture before he can convince my wife to do something that will destroy her life. But I need it to look like a coincidence, not retaliation. That can be arranged. How much time do you need? 2 weeks, maybe 3. You'll have it. He stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Mr. Valden, your wife is lucky to have someone looking out for her interests, even if she doesn't realize it. She won't see it that way. People rarely appreciate being saved from their own mistakes, but that doesn't make it less necessary. He left, taking the folder with him. I finished my coffee and drove to work, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Trevor's problems were about to become much more pressing than his relationship with my wife. The next few days passed quietly. Jessa continued her pattern of late nights and mysterious phone calls, but there was a new tension in her behavior. She checked her phone constantly, jumped at unexpected sounds, and seemed to be waiting for something. On Thursday evening, she came home early and found me in the kitchen making dinner. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight with stress. "About what?" "Money. I need to access some of our savings for a business opportunity. A good friend is starting a wellness company, and they're looking for investors." I kept stirring the pasta sauce, not trusting myself to look at her directly. "How much money?" $25,000 to start, maybe more later if the initial investment pays off." "That's a lot of money, Jessa. What kind of wellness company?" "Fitness coaching, nutrition consulting, lifestyle management. It's a growing market, especially with people becoming more health conscious after the pandemic." Every word was a lie delivered with practiced sincerity. She'd rehearsed this conversation, probably with Trevor's coaching. "Who's your friend?" I asked. "You don't know him. Someone I met through work." "Him?" She caught the slip immediately. "It's a professional relationship, Soren. This is about business, not personal feelings." "I didn't say anything about personal feelings." "You didn't have to. I can hear it in your voice, that suspicious tone you get when you think I'm not telling you everything." The accusation was so perfectly reversed, making me the paranoid husband instead of the betrayed one, that I almost admired the technique. "I'm just trying to understand the investment," I said calmly. $25,000 is our entire emergency fund. If something goes wrong, we'd have nothing left." "Nothing's going to go wrong. This is a sure thing." "There's no such thing as a sure thing in business, you know that." Her face flushed with anger. "So what, you don't trust my judgment? You think I'm too stupid to recognize a good opportunity? I think you're emotionally invested in something that might not be as good as it looks on paper." "Emotionally invested?" Her voice rose. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'd like to see a business plan, financial projections, references from other investors, the kind of due diligence we'd do for any major financial decision. You want to treat me like a client instead of your wife. I want to protect us from making a mistake we can't afford." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, weighing how hard to push, how much to reveal, whether to abandon this approach and try another. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll get you the paperwork, but I need an answer soon. This opportunity won't wait forever." "How soon?" "This weekend." After she left for another mysterious evening appointment, I called my lawyer, not the family attorney we'd used for wills and house purchases, but a divorce specialist I'd researched weeks earlier. "Mr. Valden," Patricia Hendrick said when I was finally connected, "what can I do for you?" "I need to protect myself financially. My wife is about to make some very bad decisions, and I don't want to be liable for the consequences." "What kind of decisions?" I explained the situation without mentioning Trevor by name, just that Jessa was planning to invest our savings in a fraudulent business opportunity. "If she has access to joint accounts, there's not much you can do to stop her," Patricia said. "But we can take steps to limit your liability and preserve some assets." "What kind of steps?" "Separate your finances immediately. Move money to individual accounts, document everything, and establish a paper trail showing you opposed these investments. If this goes to divorce court, you'll want evidence that you tried to prevent financial harm to the marriage." "Divorce court?" "Mr. Valden, people don't usually call divorce lawyers to discuss their spouse's business investments. If you're thinking about protecting assets, you're already thinking about ending the marriage." She was right, of course. I'd been planning for divorce without admitting it to myself. "How long would the process take?" I asked. "Depends on how contested it becomes. If she fights it, 6 months to a year. If she cooperates, maybe 3 months. "And asset division?" "Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state. The court tries to divide assets fairly, but that doesn't necessarily mean 50-50. If one spouse has wasted marital assets or committed financial fraud, that affects the calculation." I made an appointment for the following week and hung up feeling like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. For 25 years, I'd thought of our money as ours. Now I was thinking about mine and hers and how to keep them separate. Friday morning brought news that changed everything. I was at work when my phone rang, Brennan's number. "It's done," he said, without preamble. "What's done?" "Mr. Kowalski had a meeting with my clients this morning. He'll be leaving town immediately to address some pressing business matters in another state. He won't be returning to Massachusetts." "Is he?" "He's fine. Shaken, but unharmed. He'll be working off his debt through alternative arrangements that don't involve your wife's money." I felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Part of me had wanted something worse to happen to Trevor, but the rational part knew this was better. Clean, professional, final. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you, Mr. Valden. Your information was invaluable." The line went quiet. I sat at my desk, staring at the financial statements I'd been reviewing, and waited for the fallout to begin. It didn't take long. Jessa called at 2 p.m., sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "He's gone," she managed between gasps. "Trevor's gone. He left town without saying anything. His phone's disconnected, his apartment's empty. I don't understand what happened." "Slow down," I said, injecting concern into my voice. "Who's Trevor?" My business partner. The wellness company investment. Something terrible must have happened." "Are you okay? Do you want me to come home?" "No, I'm at work. I need to figure out what to do next." "Did you give him any money?" "A little. Not much. Just a good faith deposit to hold my place in the investment group." Another lie. According to the bank records I'd been monitoring, she'd already transferred $8,000 to an account in Trevor's name. "I'm sure there's an explanation," I said. "Maybe he had a family emergency." "Maybe." She didn't sound convinced. "I have to go. I'll see you tonight." I spent the rest of the afternoon working on spreadsheets and thinking about what came next. Trevor was gone, but the damage to our marriage was irreversible. Jessa had been willing to steal our savings and abandon our family for a man who saw her as nothing more than a mark. That wasn't something you came back from. When I got home that evening, she was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and a stack of papers, bank statements, investment documents, printouts of text messages, evidence of her relationship with Trevor spread out like crime scene photos. "We need to talk," she said without looking up. "I'm listening. I made some mistakes, financial mistakes, and personal ones." I sat down across from her, noting how different she looked. Older, smaller, like someone who'd just realized the ground beneath her feet wasn't as solid as she'd thought. "What kind of mistakes?" She took a shaky breath. "I've been having an affair." The confession hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire that had been burning for months. I looked at my wife of 25 years, sitting across our kitchen table with tears streaming down her face, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "With Trevor?" I asked quietly. Her head snapped up. "How did you—" "I've known for weeks, Jessa. The question is what you want to do about it." The tears stopped immediately, replaced by something harder. "You knew? And you didn't say anything?" "I was waiting to see how far you'd go. How far I'd go." She stood up abruptly, knocking over her wine glass. "What kind of sick game is that? The kind where I find out who I'm really married to." I calmly reached for paper towels to clean up the spilled wine, my movements deliberate and unhurried. 25 years of marriage had taught me that staying calm in moments like this was the most powerful weapon I had. "So what's your plan now?" I continued. "Trevor's gone, the money's lost, and you're sitting here confessing to an affair I already knew about. What's your next move?" "I don't know." She slumped back into her chair. I thought I was in love with him. I thought he cared about me." "He cared about your bank account." "How can you be so cold about this? I just told you I've been cheating on you for months." "Because I'm not surprised. Disappointed, but not surprised." I finished cleaning up the wine and sat back down, studying her face. The woman I'd married had been confident, ambitious, full of plans for our future together. This woman looked lost, defeated, like someone who'd bet everything on a hand she didn't understand. What do you want, Jessa? Do you want to work on our marriage? Do you want a divorce? Do you want to pretend this never happened and go back to the way things were? I don't know, she repeated. Everything's so complicated now. It's not complicated. You made choices. Those choices have consequences. Now you have to decide if you want to face those consequences together or separately. She was quiet for a long time, staring at the scattered papers on the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I was going to leave you. I know. Trevor and I had plans. We were going to take the money and start over somewhere new. I know that too. How? How could you possibly know all of this? I pulled out my phone and showed her some of the screenshots I'd taken from her iPad. Her face went white as she recognized her own messages. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting myself. There's a difference. For how long? Since the night you came home smelling like his cologne. She stared at the phone screen, reading her own words about an unnecessary burden and new lives and men who couldn't keep jobs. I watched her realize how those messages must have sounded to the husband she'd been planning to abandon. Soren, You what? You're sorry? You didn't mean it? It was just fantasy? It was fantasy. I was angry and frustrated, and I said things I didn't mean. Which things didn't you mean? That I was an unnecessary burden? That you couldn't wait to dump me? That the kids would understand when you disappeared with your boyfriend? Each question hit her like a physical blow. She flinched, wrapped her arms around herself, looked anywhere but at my face. I was confused. Trevor made me feel special, important, like I mattered. You did matter. You mattered to me, to Ross, to Amelia. But that wasn't enough, was it? You needed someone to tell you that you were worth stealing for. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I spent 23 years building a career to support this family, only to get laid off and have my wife treat me like a failure? Is it fair that I've been faithful, present, supportive through every crisis we've faced, while you were planning to run away with a con artist? Is it fair that I had to find out about your affair by reading your messages instead of hearing it from you? You're right. Her voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. You're absolutely right about everything. I know I am. The question is, what we do now. What do you want to do? I leaned back in my chair, looking at this woman I'd loved for half my adult life, and realized I felt nothing for her anymore. Not love, not hate, not even disappointment. Just a cold, analytical assessment of a problem that needed to be solved. I want you to understand something, I said. Trevor didn't disappear because he got cold feet or found someone better. He disappeared because some very dangerous people came looking for the $50,000 he owes them. The money you were planning to steal from our savings account? That was going to pay his gambling debts to loan sharks who don't accept payment plans. Her face went pale. What are you talking about? Trevor Kowalski, that's his real name, by the way, is a professional con artist. You weren't his girlfriend. You were his mark. He's been running this same scam for years, targeting vulnerable women and convincing them to bankroll his lifestyle while he stays one step ahead of his creditors. You're lying. I pulled out my laptop and showed her everything. The background check, the criminal history, the restraining order from his ex-wife, the documented pattern of fraud stretching back years. He never cared about you, Jessa. He cared about your access to our money. And when that money wasn't enough to save him from the people he owed, he ran, left you holding the bag for $8,000 you'll never see again. She stared at the screen, scrolling through page after page of evidence. I watched her face change as the reality sank in. Not just that she'd been played, but that she'd been willing to destroy our family for a man who saw her as nothing more than a convenient ATM. How did you find all this? I'm good at research. It's what I do for a living. Why didn't you tell me? Because you wouldn't have believed me. You would have thought I was making it up to sabotage your relationship. She closed the laptop and sat back, looking older than I'd ever seen her. So what happens now? She asked. Now you decide if you want to try to rebuild what you destroyed, or if you want to make it official. Make what official? The divorce you've been planning since you met Trevor. The word hung between us like a blade. For 25 years, divorce had been unthinkable, the nuclear option that other couples chose but never us. Now it felt inevitable, the logical conclusion to a process that had started the moment she decided I wasn't enough anymore. Is that what you want? She asked. I want my wife back, the woman I married, who believed in our partnership and our future together. But that woman's been gone for months, maybe years. I'm not interested in staying married to the person you've become. I can change. I can be that woman again. Can you? Can you forget about Trevor? Can you stop resenting me for losing my job? Can you look at me without seeing an unnecessary burden that you're stuck carrying? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. We both knew the truth. I'll file the papers Monday, I said, standing up. You can contest it if you want, but I have enough evidence of adultery and financial misconduct to make that very expensive for you. Soren, wait. I'm going to stay at Mick's place for a few days while you figure out your next move. The house is paid for, so you won't lose it immediately. But you'll need to find a way to cover the mortgage and utilities on your own. What about the kids? Ross and Amelia are adults. They'll make their own decisions about who they want to maintain relationships with. I headed for the stairs to pack a bag, then paused at the doorway. For what it's worth, Jessa, I hope you find whatever you're looking for. But you're not going to find it by destroying what you already have. I left her sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by the wreckage of our marriage and the evidence of her own poor judgment. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The game was over, and I'd won. 3 months later, I sat in divorce court wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of documents that told the story of our marriage's collapse. Jessa sat across the aisle with her attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Darrow who specialized in protecting cheating spouses from the financial consequences of their actions. The proceedings had been brutal. Jessa had initially tried to claim that the affair was a symptom of our marital problems, not the cause of them. She painted me as an emotionally distant husband who'd driven her into another man's arms through neglect and financial irresponsibility. It might have worked if I hadn't been prepared. Every claim she made, I countered with documentation. Every lie her lawyer told, I refuted with evidence. Bank records, text messages, witness statements, background checks on Trevor. I'd built an airtight case that left no room for interpretation. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Patricia Hoffman, had listened to 3 days of testimony with the expression of someone who'd seen every variation of human selfishness and wasn't impressed by any of it. This court has reviewed all evidence submitted by both parties, Judge Hoffman said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. The facts are not in dispute. Mrs. Valden engaged in an extramarital affair and attempted to transfer significant marital assets to her paramour without her husband's knowledge or consent. Jessa's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, my client's actions were the result of emotional distress caused by… Mr. Darrow, your client's emotional state doesn't excuse financial fraud. The evidence clearly shows she transferred $8,000 in marital funds to Mr. Kowalski and was planning to transfer an additional $25,000 before the relationship ended. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was savoring every word. Months of preparation, documentation, and strategic thinking had led to this moment. The court awards Mr. Valden 65% of all marital assets, the judge continued. Mrs. Valden will retain the family home, but assumes full responsibility for the mortgage and all associated costs. Mr. Valden is awarded his full pension, retirement accounts, and the contents of all joint savings accounts as of the date of separation. Darrow leaned over to whisper something to Jessa. She shook her head angrily, then stood up. Your Honor, this is completely unfair. My husband has been unemployed for months. I'm the one with steady income and job security. How am I supposed to maintain the house and support myself on 35% of our assets? Judge Hoffman's expression didn't change. Mrs. Valden, you forfeited your right to equitable treatment when you chose to commit adultery and attempt financial fraud. This court's primary concern is preventing you from benefiting from your own misconduct. But I'll lose everything. You should have considered that before you started planning to steal marital assets for your boyfriend's gambling debts. Darrow put a restraining hand on Jessa's arm, but she shook him off. This is revenge, not justice. Soren orchestrated this whole thing to punish me for being unhappy in our marriage. The judge's gaze sharpened. Mrs. Valden, I suggest you consider your next words very carefully. This court has shown considerable patience with your attempts to justify conduct that is both morally and legally indefensible. Jessa looked around the courtroom like she was searching for support, for someone to validate her sense of injustice. She found only the cold stares of court officers and the embarrassed face of her lawyer. Mr. Darrow, the judge said, does your client have anything else to add before I finalize this ruling? Darrow whispered urgently to Jessa, probably telling her to accept the judgment and move on. But I could see the anger building in her face, the same entitled rage that had driven her into Trevor's arms. Actually, Your Honor, Darrow said with obvious reluctance, my client would like to make a statement. Very well. Jessa stood up, smoothing her skirt and lifting her chin with defiant pride. Your Honor, my husband has painted me as some kind of criminal, but all I did was fall in love with someone who made me feel valued and appreciated. Yes, I made mistakes, but I was trapped in a marriage with a man who gave up on himself and expected me to go down with him. I deserve better than that. I deserve a chance to start over without being financially punished for wanting happiness. She turned to look at me directly, her eyes blazing with resentment. Soren, you've gotten your revenge. You've destroyed my reputation, cost me my job, and now you're taking everything we built together. I hope it was worth it. I hope you enjoy your new life, because you'll be living it alone. The courtroom was silent. Even Darrow looked like he wanted to disappear. Judge Hoffman let the silence stretch for a long moment before speaking. Mrs. Valden, this court is not concerned with your feelings about your marriage or your justifications for adultery. This court is concerned with facts, law, and the equitable distribution of assets based on the conduct of both parties. She shuffled through her papers, then looked up again. However, since you've chosen to address the court directly, I'll respond in kind. You were not trapped in your marriage. You were free to seek divorce at any time through proper legal channels. Instead, you chose to commit adultery and attempt financial fraud while maintaining the benefits of marriage. That is not seeking happiness. That is seeking to have everything both ways at the expense of your spouse. Jessa's face flushed red, but the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, your suggestion that Mr. Valden orchestrated these proceedings as revenge demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of personal responsibility. Mr. Valden did not force you to have an affair. He did not force you to transfer marital assets to your paramour. He did not force you to plan the theft of additional funds. You made those choices freely, and this court's ruling reflects the natural consequences of those choices. The judge turned to me. Mr. Valden, do you have any final statements for the court? This was it, the moment I'd been planning for months. I stood up slowly, reached into my briefcase, and pulled out a single document. Actually, Your Honor, I'd like to submit this as evidence. I handed the paper to the bailiff, who carried it to the judge. Jessa and her lawyer craned their necks, trying to see what I'd just produced. Judge Hoffman examined the document carefully, her eyebrows rising slightly as she read. "Mr. Darrow, are you familiar with this document?" Darrow took the paper from the bailiff, his face going pale as he scanned the contents. "Your Honor, I've never seen this before. My client never mentioned—" "What is it?" Jessa demanded, grabbing the paper from her lawyer's hands. I watched her read it, watched her face change from confusion to understanding to pure horror. "This is impossible," she whispered. "This can't be legal." "What can't be legal, Mrs. Valden?" the judge asked. Jessa looked up at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You said you'd never make me sign a prenup. You said you trusted me completely." "I did trust you. That's not a prenup." Judge Hoffman held up the document. "For the record, this appears to be a notarized addendum to the original marriage agreement, signed by both parties and witnessed by a licensed notary. It establishes specific reimbursement rights for documented marital expenditures under certain conditions." "What conditions?" Darrow asked, though his voice suggested he already suspected the answer. "Adultery, financial misconduct, or abandonment of marital responsibilities," I said calmly. "Standard language that protects both spouses from the other's potential misconduct." "When did you have me sign this?" Jessa demanded. "Remember 3 years ago when you wanted to refinance the house? You said all the paperwork was too complicated and asked me to handle it. You signed a stack of documents without reading them, including this addendum. You tricked me. I protected us, both of us. If I'd been the one to cheat or commit financial fraud, you would have been protected by the same provisions." Judge Hoffman was reading through the document again, comparing signatures and dates. "This appears to be properly executed and legally binding. Mr. Darrow, do you wish to challenge its validity?" Darrow looked like he was considering it, but after a moment he shook his head. "Without time to conduct a thorough review, I can't mount an effective challenge." "Very well." The judge entered the document into the record. "This addendum triggers an automatic recalculation of asset division. Given the documented evidence of Mrs. Valden's misconduct and the reimbursement provisions outlined in this agreement, the court awards Mr. Valden 85% of all marital assets." 85%? Jessa's voice cracked. "That leaves me with almost nothing." "It leaves you with exactly what you're entitled to under the agreement you signed," Judge Hoffman replied. "This court's ruling is final." The gavel came down with the sound of a door slamming shut. I packed my briefcase methodically, while Jessa sat in stunned silence. Darrow was already distancing himself, gathering his papers and muttering about appeals that we both knew would never materialize. "How?" Jessa asked as I prepared to leave. "How did you plan all of this?" I looked at her one last time. This woman I'd loved, trusted, built a life with, and finally outmaneuvered when she tried to destroy everything we'd created together. "You called me an unnecessary burden, Jessa. You said I was a failure who couldn't keep a job or provide for his family. You were planning to steal our savings and abandon our children for a con artist who saw you as nothing more than a mark." I closed my briefcase and stood up. "You forgot that I spent 23 years as a finance director. I know how to read people, how to track money, how to plan for contingencies. You thought you were playing chess with someone who didn't know the rules." I started walking toward the exit, then paused and looked back. "You were wrong about everything, but especially about one thing. I'm not an unnecessary burden. I never was. I was just waiting for the right moment to prove it." I walked out of that courtroom a free man, financially secure and morally vindicated. Behind me, I left a woman who'd gambled everything on a fantasy and lost it all to reality. The game was over. The house always wins. And I was the house.